I vaguely recall. Now, it may be a different case.
Morning, everybody. Good. Thank you for attending, everybody, and everybody that's online at this time. My name is Claude Chansey. I am the Public Information Officer for the Winnipeg Police Service. Today we have a release on a child death investigation. Warning to people that are listening, this following news release contains information that may be disturbing to members of the public. Just be aware. Beginning in March 2023, the Winnipeg Police Service's Child Abuse Unit entered into an investigation regarding the sudden death of 1-year-old Hannah Willett. On March 23, 2023, an adult male called 911 after his child had become unresponsive at their residence. Attending members of the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service administered CPR to the child before conveying her to hospital, where she was pronounced deceased. Investigators arrested the parents for criminal negligence causing death. The adult male faced a charge of possession of a controlled substance after officers found a small quantity of fentanyl on his person at the time of his arrest. Both were subsequently released. Through their investigation, investigators determined that both parents were not forthcoming with details of the incident and were present and had been aware of Anna's fentanyl exposure before later calling emergency. Autopsy and toxicology reports determined that Anna's death resulted from high levels of fentanyl intoxication. The Child Abuse Unit consulted with Manitoba Prosecution Service, which authorized a charge of manslaughter against the parents. And on February 2nd, 2024, investigators arrested both parents at their residence in the first 100 block of Mackenzie Street without incident. Gary Daniel Adrian Bruce, 38, and Sabrina Faye Boulette, 37, both of Winnipeg, are charged with manslaughter and have been detained in custody. And just as for your information, that would automatically add that count of homicides for the year 2023 and add that by 1, which would be a total of 44 for 2023. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them now.
Were there any other adults or children in the home at this time when police initially went to the house on March 23rd?
From my understanding is that it was only the 2 adults and the child.
Is there a belief that had the parents have been forthcoming with investigators or paramedics, would naloxone have made a difference in this case for this child?
Well, I think it's important here that the amount of time that had passed from where the parents were aware of the child's fentanyl exposure to the time that 911 was called was certainly a factor that may have played in the child's death.
How much time expired?
I can't give you the exact amount of time, but it was several hours.
Why did they wait? Why did they wait?
Again, that's something that they would only be able to answer. It is part of the investigation. And it's something that they knew that the child was in distress at the time and could have called 911 prior to when they did.
How do police know that? What do police believe happened in the sense that they knew and didn't call?
That goes to the story that was provided to investigators. So when the parents were interviewed, they provided some explanation to the circumstances that were not truthful. And again, that forms part of the investigation, but that also forms the basis of providing the Crown with the details of investigation which brought the authorization of the manslaughter charges.
Can you talk about the exposure to the drug, like how the child?
Again, that's very specific to the case itself. We know from the toxicology reports that it was a large amount of fentanyl was found present in the child's body.
What would be a large amount? Like, do you mean large amount for a child or large amount for anybody?
Well, you have to keep in mind, a child, of course, at 2 years old has no regular exposure to fentanyl. If you're looking at people that are regularly using the drug, of course, they will have a more the ability to resist the effects of fentanyl as time goes on with the more use of the drug. We're talking a 2-year-old child, so it wouldn't take a large amount of fentanyl to prove fatal, which it did in this case.
And you said 2-year-old, the release says 1-year-old. So
Yes, I'm sorry.
almost a 2-year-old?
I'm sorry. No, it is 1-year-old. Thank you for the correction.
Do you know if CFS was involved?
That I can't say. Again, that's part of the investigation. But any time there's a child related incident, it's more than likely that Child and Family Services would have some information or be up to date with that.
Is this home on Mackenzie the same home that police and paramedics went to on March 23rd?
I could say it is not.
Do the parents have any other children, or was this their only child?
If for the relevance of this case, this is the only child that is relevant for this particular incident.
Where was it in March 2023 when police were called? Which streets?
That I don't have the exact street for you right now, but I'd be more than happy to answer that if you send me an email.
How long did it take for the toxicology? Just there's obviously a time difference.
There is,
here,
and that's a
right?
great question, and a lot of times all these things take time. So we realize here an incident that happened in the beginning of March, and we've got an arrest that happened in February. So there, of course, there are a lot of components that build up to the case and those charges. Within that first incident, the toxicology reports came back in June. I can't give you the exact date, but it was in June. And at that point, that kind of precipitated as well, with the information that the parents were not forthcoming with details of the incident, that precipitated the investigation, and it also precipitated the investigators having the opportunity to bring that forth to the Manitoba Prosecution Service for review.
Were the parents ever charged for criminal negligence causing death or just arrested?
So they're arrested, and that was the charge, would be criminal negligence at that point. But because it warranted further investigation and consultation with the Crown's office, that's where we needed consultators with the Crown's office. That's where it needed to have more time.
When something like this happens involving fentanyl and a child ingesting a drug like this, is there anything that you would say or would want to say about protecting or the seriousness of these drugs and the effect it could have on a child?
Well, as a parent myself, and I'm sure a lot of you are in the room are parents, and we know this. Our society right now has a substance abuse problem. The fact of the matter is we still need to protect our children. So whether or not you have a drug problem, an alcohol problem, what have you, if you have children in your care, your first responsibility is their safety. We're seeing more of these incidents come through, and this is not just particular to Winnipeg. There's more occurrences you'll have noticed in other parts of Canada where we have children who are not responsible for themselves, who are subjected to having fentanyl and other substances that can be fatal to them at close accessibility. And for us, it's a very concerning thing.
Going back to the time, are you able to provide an approximate time between when the parents noticed something was wrong with their child to when they actually physical?
Again, that forms part of the investigation, but I can tell you it's several hours.
Several hours.
Several hours.
And then also, after the toxicology report in June, were they cooperating with police? Were they giving police more information after that?
Well, I can tell you it was on the onset that the information, when they were not forthcoming, it was on the onset of the investigation. So investigators were pretty quick in realizing that that information didn't line up. And from that point, they were able to actually build the case. And along with the consultation with the Crown's office, that's when we come to this point where we have those charges of manslaughter being able to be authorized and brought against them.
And will the parents still remain in custody, or are they still in custody?
I believe they're still in custody, but you know what? You can actually send me an email. I will verify that for you.
Is there any indication the parents tried to provide any medical assistance to the kid before calling police?
Without going into too much details, I can say there was an attempt to do so, but again, they're not professionals. they're not medical professionals. And I think when we are and speaking hypothetically, if we have anybody that we're taking care of that is not capable to take care of themselves, it is our duty to call somebody that can. So 911, ambulance services will come and take care of the child and provide the life-saving measures that need to be taken care of.
Were the suspects using the drug as well around the time the child was exposed?
It is our understanding that they were.
You mentioned, there have been examples of this kind of thing previously, not just in Winnipeg, but elsewhere. In Winnipeg, what would be the frequency of these kinds of cases?
It's not that it happens all the time. I'm not going to say that they do, but very recently, I believe it was in beginning of January, we actually had a child ingested fentanyl incident that we reported on. In that particular case, again, it was in a household, and that child was a 2-year-old male, and same thing, ingestion of fentanyl that was readily accessible, right? So it's something that's just a month ago or so, right? So it's too close in proximity, and the fact that we're even talking about one person right now, that's too many, especially that age, right?
What is the situation when it comes to fentanyl in Winnipeg? Like, how often are police being called to incidents or encountering people who, taking the drug and either they need help or their police are being requested for other reasons?
We come across it all the time. The amount of overdoses that we're seeing are quite high. They're increasing, and we deal with those on a daily basis. In a lot of cases, we're lucky enough to be there at the right time, or members of the Winnipeg Police Fire Paramedic Service are there in time to help provide life-saving measures where the person's life is saved. In cases where we're talking like today, that time frame is of course lengthened because nobody's paying attention, nobody's calling the numbers that they need to call. We need to pay a lot more attention to that because we need to see less deaths on our streets and in homes when we're talking with children here. We don't need to see that at all.
What's the impact, I guess, for the members of the child abuse unit when they have to deal with an incident like this?
Well, that's their job, right? And no matter if it's what they do, what we do as police officers, you as in the media, members of the general public, it's heartbreaking when we see these instances. We do not need to see infants dying at the hands of irresponsibility. Okay, whether or not a person has an addiction or a substance abuse problem, this is inexcusable.
En français, une question en français.
Je vais essayer mon mieux.
Comment vous avez déterminé l'accusation pour meurtre au lieu de criminalité?
Alors, normalement, quand on a cette sorte de... c'est pas un meurtre, c'est en anglais manslaughter.
Yeah.
Alors, c'est une infraction, on doit prouver l'intention du crime. Alors, si l'intention était plus sévère, on aurait une criminalité plus sévère. Alors, c'est pour ça qu'on a eu cette infraction. J'espère que j'ai répondu à cette question.
Is this the same Gary Bruce that has appeared on the Manitoba's Most Wanted list in the past?
I can't confirm that for you, but I'd be happy to look into that for you if you want to send me an email.
And did either of the parents have any criminal history that you're aware of?
I can tell you both of them were known to police before.
And I'm pretty sure you mentioned this, so is it an upgraded charge or are they being charged manslaughter in addition to criminal negligence?
No. So the criminal they were arrested on the criminal negligence, right? But they were never formally, those charges were never laid. So the charge now of manslaughter has been authorized and it has now been laid. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, on the charge of why not lay criminal negligence and manslaughter, why only lay manslaughter?
Well, manslaughter will cover a lot of things, right? And like I was explaining, or trying to explain to my colleague in French there, the charge of manslaughter refers basically to the intent and the criminality of the offense. Manslaughter is certainly a more comprehensive charge than criminal negligence would be, and that's why that charge was laid. Anyone else? Thank you very much for coming.